All right, Dick, I want to just welcome everybody to this Stormwater Awareness Week workshop. And we're so glad to have you here for the first one of the morning. And we're very privileged to have Dick. How do you say your last name? I'm going to butcher it.
Bernauer.
Bernauer. Dick Bernauer with us. And I'm really looking forward to hearing his talk about living roofs and incorporating that into low impact design, and that is a big topic right now in the stormwater industry. So thank you for joining Stormwater Awareness Week to all our participants, and thank you, Dick, for presenting this hour. I'm going to try to give you as much time as possible, so why don't you take it away. If people have a question, you already mentioned it, but what they can do is either put it in the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat, or you can even unmute yourself and field a question to Dick. So Dick, the hour is all yours.
Thank you, John, and thank you, Rebecca, for having me and organizing the Stormwater Awareness Week. It's been a hot topic for a long time, and especially the past few months, it seems to be in the news quite a bit. And even though I'm not even going to get close to solving the stormwater problem, I hope to offer a very good-looking solution to managing stormwater, but do it on the roof. My name is Dick Bernauer. I'm the National Sales Director for a company called Sempergreen. And Sempergreen initially was hosted or was founded in the Netherlands, and that's where I came from. And then one day I came over, and I keep missing the flight back. So I've been here almost 22 years. I think my parents gave up hope that I will return. And you know, when you grow up in a land that's so green, that's so focused on green, not just on the ground, but also on the walls and also on the roof, where it's kind of a thing. It's almost not done. If you build a new building, you are doing a green roof, you are doing solar, you are doing whatever you can to minimize your footprint. And moving to the States, it was a bit of a rude awakening, because a lot of times I would see the lobbies of buildings, the lobbies of apartments look really cool, and then when you go up to the offices where the actual work happened, or you go to the rooftops, there wasn't much green. And the reason was that people simply weren't very familiar, weren't very trusting that green roof would work. So after a lot of lobbying, a lot of exciting pictures from European projects, finally the mayor of Minneapolis said, like, hey, you know what? I've got a big building. It's an NBA basketball stadium. It's called the Target Center, and let's make that green. And funny enough, all of a sudden, Sempergreen became the expert. All of a sudden, Minneapolis was the greenest city, and we know everything there was to know about green roofs, which obviously was just based on that one project. Now, fast forward 14 years later, green roofs are not just done for aesthetics, not just done for PR, not just done for lead points. Lately, there's a big push to turn green roofs into a stormwater management tool. And I'll show a few slides, but mainly I want to show you a design tool and kind of take you through the evolution of green roofs and what a green roof can do for your building. So I'll share a screen right now. It starts with who I am and my email address. So feel free to note that down, and or call me if you have a specific project or if you have questions other than the ones that will be addressed today. So made in the Netherlands, the land of Heineken, Heineken beer, bicycles, and windmills. This is my house back in Holland. Just kidding. But Sempergreen started as a simple, we were farmers. We were just figuring out a way to green rooftops on day one. Instead of doing it with cuttings or plugs, we created a product called the sedum mat. It was completely covered with drought tolerant sedum plant varieties that you could roll out like sedum sod or like grass sod and green your rooftops on day one. That got a little bit out of control. because now we have multiple locations all over the world. My portion is I'm responsible for the Canadian, the US, and also the Mexican market as far as green roofs and living walls. I won't touch on living walls today, but I'll just stick to green roofs. Like I said, this is the target center, and I feel like it had more to do with the PR portion of green roofs rather than the stormwater management reasoning behind doing a green roof. But it went from a very bare, ugly roof to a fully planted green roof. Same with the US Coast Guard, 510,000 square feet of greened rooftop. New York City now has a mandate. Chicago has a mandate. DC has a mandate. And it's all based on how can we bring biodiversity back into the city? How can we create some stormwater retention? Minimizing the amount of water that goes into the sewer system, and often a combined sewer system. So where some projects are done still for aesthetics, more and more people are leaning towards doing green roofs for stormwater management. Simple green roofs. They don't all have to be 510,000 square feet. They can be small. Residences do their garden sheds. I'm going to Aspen, Colorado. Obviously, there's quite a bit of money in beautiful residences, but it's not all the $30 million homes that are turning to green roofs. Then one day we had a very rude awakening where a civil engineer during a meeting said, "Dick, green roofs are beautiful. Green roofs are used for lead points, for aesthetics, but the industry as a whole is claiming that green roofs are good for stormwater management." And I agree with that for the most part. But the part that I don't agree with is the reason why green roofs won't be utilized as a stormwater management tool. And they said, it's very simple. A green roof is basically a sponge that you put on top of a rooftop based on how much saturated weight that rooftop can handle. You choose the green roof assembly, and sometimes it's just your succulents. And if you have a little bit more weight available, then you can do a full perennial garden on top of your building. I said, but it's still a sponge. The sponge has a maximum retention capacity. In other words, you fill up a sponge, at one point it's full, it's completely saturated. And if you keep adding water, that additional water goes straight to the drain. It's one drop in, one drop out. So, well, a green roof absorbs water when it's dry. Once it's saturated, it doesn't have any water, any detention capacity. It doesn't slow down the water that comes after your green roof is completely saturated. And he said, if you can come up with a concept that slows down stormwater after your green roof is saturated, then we can see it as a stormwater management tool, and we will use it as a legit option to manage stormwater on that site. Because right now, a standard green roof is a parachute that opens 80% of the time. It works 80% of the time, but that 20%, that second day storm, it doesn't function like a stormwater management tool. And if I were to give you a parachute and I told you on the airplane, Dick, you're going to jump out of this airplane with the parachute, but it works 80% of the time, would you go down with the airplane and not use the parachute at all, or would you jump? Likely I wouldn't jump. So they say, create a stormwater management tool that looks like a green roof, and the cities where green roofs are mandated can now not just check a box and have the lightest, most cheapest green roof on top of their building, but they would tweak that system so that it can manage stormwater, and you can reduce the size of that detention tank in the basement. Now, that might not make a big difference when you're in the middle of Oregon or the middle of California or the middle of New York State. But if you are in a high dense area where real estate is very expensive, people are fighting for space for retail, or more important, like parking spots. If you can manage part of that stormwater on the roof and give a developer like 5 parking spots or 10 parking spots back, or a few retail, give them a few Starbuckses, then you create an ROI for that green roof that in a lot of cities, more and more cities, is already mandated. So that's during COVID. Obviously, we weren't traveling. We had to do something with our time, and that's where we created the purple roof concept. And you can see it on the screen. Simplified is like you have a stormwater tank in the basement because it's mandated to temporarily hold that stormwater and release it into the city system after the storm has passed, but you're not doing anything with your green roof or with your roof surface. Turn it into a green roof and get your parking spots back. That's a very simplified concept, but if you sit down with the city, they just care about the retention. They care about that first 80% or 70% of that stormwater. A developer will care about the space in the basement because that is where they pretty much pay for the green roof, and that's what generates income for that building. So very important real estate in dense cities. The more rural you go, the less important it becomes to manage stormwater on the roof, because your space in the basement is not as expensive, or you can manage your stormwater on a landscape. So basically, this is the concept. And what I wanted to show you now is, I'll share another screen where we developed a tool for you to really look at how to design this. Let me see. You think I would be really smooth at sharing my screen? Let me see. Here we go. So can you see this screen? The Purple Roof Concept website, Purple.
Yes, Dick, we can.
You can, okay, because usually I have like a nice green frame around the screen that I'm sharing, and today it's not doing that. So thank you, John. So we decided, like, okay, how can we increase the market for a green roof? How can we give value to a green roof? Because I'm in Washington, D.C., and I see a ton of green roofs. But the moment I cross the Potomac River into Alexandria, I don't see a lot of green roofs. And my battle, the Semper Green battle, is not to get a green roof over a competitor. The mission and the purpose for us is to make green roofs more attractive. Like, yes, I know they have to make financial sense. And yes, we want to make sure that it's not too heavy that the green roof comes crashing down. So we need to stay within weight capacity, roof load capacity, but we also want to make sure that we create an ROI. So without putting the Semper Green name all over it, we decided to make a performance-based recipe, and we call it the Purple Roof Concept. So before I touch on Purple Roof Concept, I want to show you the evolution of a green roof. I'm not sure how familiar the attendees are with green roofs or green roof design. So feel free to chime in. But basically, a green roof, when it was used for aesthetics or lead points, kind of looked like the one on the left. We call it the traditional green roof, or also, with all due respect, the grandfather green roof. You have your roofing membrane, you have a drainage layer, you have growing media, and you have vegetation. And the growing media could be, anywhere from like 3 inches to maybe 18 inches. The deeper you go, the heavier it is, but the more plants you can select to grow on a green roof. And obviously, if you're in California, the plant palette looks a little different than when you're in Boston, Massachusetts. But we do projects for the past 14 years. We've done projects all over North America in the most challenging climates. So not that we figured it all out, but I think we have quite a bit of history. We said, well, does my green roof need irrigation? Yeah, like, well, LEED doesn't like that you have to irrigate your green roof. It's like, okay, let's make it as foolproof as possible, where we took some of the growing media out and we replaced it with needled mineral wool. And it's just literally rocks that are recycled, that are spun to little threads. They turn it into a blanket, and the water retention capacity of that layer is so much higher that it holds the water in the green roof system so much more that you don't need to irrigate that much, which in a more rainy climate isn't that big of a deal. But if you are in California, holding that water into your assembly, whether it's on the ground or on the rooftop, because we do this on the ground as well, is a huge deal. The goal is to make the green roof assembly lighter, make it hold water longer so you don't have to irrigate less, and make it a little bit more foolproof for the maintenance company. Understand that green roof growing media is made to drain quick, which is fine if you're in Western Europe. I'm from Amsterdam and it rains constantly. I'm not sure if you've been there, but it most likely was a rainy day. So there it can drain pretty quick. But even in areas like Seattle or Portland, where in the summer it's dry, you want to hold that water in that assembly as long as you can. That's this concept where you combine the growing media with the needled mineral wool. We call it sponge roof. And it's just a sponge roof concept where if you're a designer or if you are a building owner, this assembly can be supplied by literally every green roof system manufacturer. And sometimes it's a landscaper, and sometimes it's the company that supplies the waterproofing membrane. They can also supply the green roof, and they can then offer a single source warranty. So if there's a leak in the roof, which people fear for, right? Like if I have a leak in the roof, but there's a green roof on top. Now what do? There's waterproofing membrane companies that sell the waterproofing plus the green roof assembly, get a single source warranty, so you call that company. Now, back to the stormwater management portion. In Europe and in Southeast Asia, we already manage stormwater on a roof. We've been doing that for a long time. And my main question to the starchitects of the country is like, why is this not done here? Why is a concept like the blue roof, in this case, a blue-green roof, because it's water storage plus green, but it can go under pavers as well. Why is that concept not used here like it is in Europe? Is it the way we built the buildings? It's like, well, a lot of times, because this is the land of liability, the land of the lawyers, they say, if we hold water on top of the roof and there is a leak in the membrane, the risk for that water to come in the top floor into an office space is too high. So people shy away from ponding water on top of the roof. So what happens in a blue roof assembly is the water falls, whether it's on the green roof or on the pavers, and ends up in this caveat. It's pretty much like plastic milk crates, and the water is stored on the roof. And where it's released is at the drain, and that drain has a restrictor. So the restrictor can be opened a little bit or a little bit more, or can be pulled completely based on the location and maybe the type of the storm. But during the collection of that water is ponding directly on the membrane. So you're basically creating a shallow swimming pool. And that shallow swimming pool, people specifically in the United States are not comfortable with. So they say, well, we don't want a swimming pool. Also, don't I need a completely flat deck? Because if I have a tilted bathtub, that doesn't work that well. Like, yeah, agreed. You need a completely flat roof. You need hot fluid applied membrane, because no seams, because if you have seams, there could potentially be leaks. It's very heavy, and you need a high parapet. So there's so many reasons here not to do not to do a purple roof, or not to do a blue roof, sorry, that they say, well, if a traditional green roof or a sponge roof doesn't manage my stormwater, because a sponge roof is basically a thicker sponge. Yes, it holds more water, but the retention capacity will at one point be maxed out. Sometimes during the storm, or sometimes the next day when it's still saturated from the Monday storm and it rains again. Now you're not managing that stormwater because it's saturated and it's one drop in, one drop out. So if a blue roof is a concept that people are not comfortable with, and if a green roof is something that doesn't satisfy the civil engineers who are in charge of the stormwater calculations. Can we come up with the Diet Coke of blue roofs? I'm like, yeah. And clearly, we did not pay good attention in art class because we thought, well, if you have a blue roof and you mix it with green, blue and green makes purple. And by the time somebody told us, like, Dick, it definitely doesn't make purple. It's more like a muddy color brown. It was too late. Purple-roof.com was born. The purple roof marketing people were already working on branding everything we were working on. So we called the baby the purple roof concept. Now, instead of ponding water, where you have the restrictor, like the restriction of the water outflowing off the roof, instead of having that at the drain, we put a layer under the entire green roof assembly. So it's a 1/2 inch nylon layer with 1,800 vertical threads. So once the water hits that layer, it doesn't go German Autobahn style to the drain, but yet it has to meander around all those vertical threads. And that is something that you can measure how long that takes and what volume that is based on the location of where the green roof is, based on the slope where you are, and based on the allowable outflow rate. How fast am I allowed to dump that stormwater into the city system? So the restrictor is not at the drain, but it's in this friction layer, which we call detention layer. So detention simply is slowing down the outflow of the stormwater. So what happens when it rains, because there's a bottleneck here at the bottom, instead of at the drain, which is the case of the blue roof, the water doesn't pond underneath the green roof system, but it literally slowly floods all these layers during the peak of the storm, which is typically between 6 and 12 minutes, no matter where you are. So you're basically flooding your green roof. So because you don't have freestanding water and you don't need a completely flat deck, it can be any type of membrane. The purple roof is something that's a lot easier for the lawyers to accept. So that's what we did. All the testing based on 3 inches of soil, 1 inch of mineral wool, 5 inches of soil, 2 inches of mineral wool. We've done over 3,500 tests at our Stormwater Lab that's operated by a company called Green Roof Diagnostics. And that lab is located in Culpeper, Virginia, where the main farm that we own, 180 acres of green roof vegetation farm, that's where we have the Stormwater Lab. So that's why we test. It's like, okay, my project is in San Francisco, or it's in Seattle, or it's in Houston. How much weight do we have to work with? Based on that weight, what is the optimal green roof assembly for that location that creates as much detention as we could possibly get based on the saturated weight that we are allowed to work with? Are there any questions so far? Because I'm talking quite a bit. Are there any specific questions so far? And feel free to unmute yourself. If there's no question, I'm going to go to the tool that we created to design a green roof based on where you are located. And again, this is a non-proprietary concept, so it's not just Semper Green, because we understand not everybody, we cannot win every single green roof project, even though I'd love to work with you on projects. We just say we create a retention modeler. So on the top right, there's a menu button, and we say, okay, let's go ahead and design a green roof. The retention model, and you can select a location and a country, because Semper Green operates all over the world, so we do this all over the world. Does anybody want to shout out like a major U.S. city, or should I just pick one, because it's set for Seattle? But if you have a specific request, feel free to pick a city.
How about San Francisco?
San Francisco. Okay. San Francisco, we're going to pretend to design a green roof in San Francisco. So what we have done, and there's a lot of red. Red means, red means like there is a lot of stress on your green roof because in San Francisco, there's not a lot of rain. So what you're looking at right now is that the average weather per day for San Francisco for the past 25 years. So if we look on, what is today, the 28th, I'm gonna make a prediction if you need an umbrella today, and it's looking like you don't, right? So on 28th, the average temperature is 65 degrees, and guess what? It's not gonna rain today. So if you take another city, for example, you pick Seattle, you'll see that the rain is obviously a lot more, but it's constant. You don't have your high peaks, but it's constant rain. Yet in the summer, you see that there's not a lot of rain, and no rain means more stress on the green roof because it's simply drying out. So let's go back to San Francisco. Go here, go on the menu, retention modeler. We go to San Francisco. So if I built a green roof, and we always start with a basic assembly, and we have a drainage layer, we have soil, we have plants, like I refer to the grandfather green roof. We have no mineral wool, we have a simple drain plate, 3.5 inches of soil, and in this case, our cedar mat, because yes, we are a little selfish, we at least put our own vegetation in there. If you make this assembly thinner, let's say you turn it to 2.5 inches, you see more red. Thinner green roof assembly dries out quicker. If you make it thicker, you see that it holds more water, therefore the need of irrigation for the portions that are now yellow are not necessary. Now, I have to be honest, in San Francisco, it doesn't really matter too much how thick you make it. You're always going to need some irrigation, right? Because you have to water. There's simply a lack of rainfall. But if you go, let's pick Seattle again. If you pick Seattle and you say, you know what, I'm going to make it a little bit thicker, or I'm going to add some mineral wool, 1 inch or 2 inches of mineral wool. You see how you eliminate the need of irrigation. Keep in mind, the saturated weight is here. So you're 47 pounds per square feet. So basically, the number one thing you do with the green roof is like structural engineer. Main question, how much saturated weight outside the snow loads do I have available for my green roof assembly? And that is your starting point. Then you come to this side and say, okay, based on 34 pounds per square feet, what is my best assembly? So I find that 2 inches of mineral wool, 2.5 inches of soil, and then your cedar mat will be your best assembly. So it's a tool that anybody can use, any designer can use, and it takes the guessing game out of it with the question like, do I need an irrigation system? Do I just need to have a water source available that I can hook up a hose? Well, if you have a 750 square foot green roof, you're probably good with that hose. If you have a 15,000 square foot green roof, are you really going to hand water 15,000 square feet every single time it's needed? Not likely.
Dick, I have a question for you. Yeah. So the plant selection, does that build into this model as far as the types of plants we're picking and the need to irrigate?
Yeah, of course, because what you see is sedums are a lot more drought tolerant. If you have more like annuals or perennials, they need more water, right? But in general, we pick this as a baseline. If you say, Dick, I want a perennial garden, then obviously we need to increase the amount of soil because a lot of perennials simply won't grow in that shallow profile, and it will alter the irrigation needs.
You know, is there an option to have like a xeriscape landscaping where it doesn't need really any irrigation? I mean, I know that's maybe defeating the point of a green roof, but it is, as far as stormwater treatment, functional.
Yeah, for sure. So if you take the sedum mat, I mean, sedums are very, very drought tolerant. If you xeriscape that, you would be able to reduce the amount of irrigation. But instead of like putting like a ton of different plant varieties in here and creating so many different scenarios, we select, okay, what is the most common use type of plants as your base layer? That's simply still sedum, whether you are in Europe or in the US. If you have a project, say, Dick, I want a perennial garden, or Dick, I'm going to do a more of a xeriscape. What do you think the recommendation for irrigation would be? Then we would have that one-on-one. So this is by no means the end all be all, but it's a very good way of creating a base layer for a very simple, extensive green roof, or saying, well, in New York, it's a concrete jungle. I have more room for additional weight. I have 60 pounds. What do you think I would do? And then we'll get to the plant selection a little bit later. Does that help?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so the civil engineer, the person in charge of managing the stormwater, is looking at these purple lines. That means like, okay, it rains. The higher the rainstorm, the higher the stormwater that comes out, right? Because you hit that saturation point, and sometimes you hit it after 5 minutes because the green roof is still saturated from the day before, and sometimes it takes an entire day because the green roof was dry and it's not raining very hard. So it's really like the 15 to 20% of the storms that make the difference between green roofs as a stormwater management tool or green roofs just doing their thing, because it's not going to create any issues. So in San Francisco, you see a little bit higher peaks of stormwater, of rain events, but they happen usually in the winter months only. Now, for an architect to say, okay, I need exact numbers, you look at this. You go click on those details and you say, the total thickness, the dry weight, the saturated weight, the retention volume, because in New York, they base the green roof mandate on a specific retention number. So if I change the assembly and make it a little bit thinner, these values will simply change. So that is for stormwater numbers, a key tool to determine what my green roof should look like. So you have retention volume and you have the saturated weight. Saturated weight is usually where it all stops, because if we exceed that, you have two choices. Hey, it's reinforcing my roof is still a lower cost than those big tanks in the basement, the big cisterns. So it's worth spending the money to reinforce the roof. Or, yeah, I don't want to reinforce the roof. Let's see what we can do based on what we already planned on doing. And then you can create different profiles. And if you're not a designer, this doesn't apply to you as much, but architects find this really, really useful. They say, okay, I have a parapet height. I click on the parapet and it's not 10 inches, but it's 14 inches. I don't have pavers, but I have gravel, or I have it all the way to the parapet. The bottom line of this tool, a designer can understand what a detail would look like and understand what he can do to manipulate this. And all these tools can be used and to be implemented into the design, or they can share it with the building owner, with the architect, the landscape architect, by clicking on a share button. They copy this URL. They simply just send that URL to whoever they need to send it to. They click on it and they see exactly what we just did. So this is all to create a green roof and to create a sponge roof. Now, if we go to detaining stormwater, because this is only retention. The sponge effect is retaining the water. The detention is slowing down the water after your green roof has been saturated. And there's a tool for that. If you go to purple-roof.com, you will not see this tool. If we work on a specific project together, you will see this tool. You will have access. You can log in to a specific part of this website. You log in and you will see your your project. And I'm just going to pick one. So you can see what this detention modeler can do for your projects. Perfect example, University of Princeton in New Jersey is typically not a big fan of green roofs. Why? I don't know. You know, it's a obviously very high level, well-respected university, but green roofs was just not part of their campus design. So when they were building a few new buildings, they were planning on using a big tank in the basement. Now they say a green roof, some people on the design team were pushing for a green roof, and they say, oh no, we're not comfortable. What if there's a leak? And then say, well, what if we use it as a stormwater tool and we kick out your tank? So you don't have to dig a hole in the ground, dump $1 million worth of concrete in there, cover it up and never be seen again. So that stormwater, we should use water as a resource. It's not a burden that we want to put away. We need to make sure that we use that and turn it into something aesthetic. So you get your green roof and you get a lower cost stormwater management tool. And I think we had them at lower cost. That's typical for building owners or developers. Is that okay? We have a project here. The design storm, the civil engineer would know about, the type 2, 8.3 inches in 24 hours. That's a massive storm, even not the craziest storm, but it's a massive storm. And we knew that our maximum allowable outflow rate was 0.94. Those are set numbers for any location, anywhere in the city, anywhere in the world, really. They have a maximum allowable outflow rate. Then we knew the saturated weight that we had to work with, and we knew the slope of the green roof that we had to work with. In this case, it was 7,000 square feet, but sometimes we have some paver areas because it doesn't need to be green to have that detention layer in the assembly. In New York, we have several projects where we manage the stormwater under pavers. And if the paver area is large enough, or sometimes it's portions are paver, portions are green roof, and different areas of the building. So we look at the project at the very beginning with the architect, with the landscape architect, with the civil engineer, and say, where can we apply this? So we need to come in fairly early in the design stage. What specific areas do we have to work with? We enter that into this calculator. We click go. It starts to, it'll start to rain. Ha ha ha. Clearly our designer was very creative, especially not traveling. And it creates a report. In this case, see the bees and butterflies are already buzzing around. The assembly was set on a detention layer, mineral wool. We had 5.5 inches of soil, and then we had what we call the bee and butterfly planter mix. But don't worry about the plants so much. Worry more about the thickness of the assembly. And so we have this calculated our dry weight, our saturated weights. Here we have a hydrology map that says, like, well, this is your peak of the storm, but we're basically taking that peak of the storm, the volume of water of the Empire State Building, and we're going to lay it on its side. So we're going to delay the outflow of that stormwater. So you don't reduce the volume, or you reduce the volume of water if your green roof is saturated, but all the testing is done based on a fully saturated green roof. So based on that, you see that this assembly, before the water comes out and it's delayed by this detention layer, it delays the outflow. The red line is the outflow and the runoff of that roof. We created a 56% reduction of peak flow, and we stayed within the allowable outflow rate. In this case, we were at 0.71 versus the allowed 0.94. Now, I have to say, the first time we make this calculation is probably a big fat red X, because we're flowing out, letting too much water flow out. This fish will be upside down, not happy. This might not be okay, because we start at a base layer at the thinnest profile, and we start building it up. Like, how about now? Do we stay within our parameters? No? Okay, let's tweak it again, tweak it again, tweak it again. And it takes usually within 30 minutes, we have a bunch of green marks and a very happy fish. That means we flood the green roof because of that detention layer. We create a bottleneck. the stormwater will fill up the whole green roof assembly, but it's only up to 88% filled. So we will never have the overflow. So we'll never have a completely flooded green roof where the water overflows. So there's no sheet flow. So this is just one example. And I think at this point we have 47 projects in the works where they chose to go with the purple roof concept versus using tanks in the basement. So when I grow up in a country where everything is green, whether it's just parks or just common landscape, but also living walls and green roofs, this tool was developed to go on a mission, and hopefully you guys will all be on that mission to make the US cities a lot more greener, a lot more sustainable for people and civil engineers, typically your most conservative group for trying out something new, to get them to accept managing stormwater on a green roof, play our little tiny role in managing stormwater on the buildings that we're already building, and sometimes it could even be on an existing building, and make this world a much greener place. So obviously, it cannot prevent the massive floods that you see in New York City, but if we can do our role, and the Dutch are known for managing stormwater. If not, my town would probably be underwater at this point. So we build our dikes. We are called into the city of Boston to say, hey, how can you help us managing stormwater? Because it's a problem, it's an increasing problem, and we want to combine it with beautifying the buildings and creating biodiversity, the urban heat island effect. So all these little side effects that come with the green roof that are important as well. How can you create an ROI for green roofs? So if you want to read a little bit more or listen to a lot more information on green roofs, this concept, or this purple-roof.com, is very informational, and it's not sponsored by anybody. It's just purely informational. How does it affect urban air quality, nutrient leaching, how much CO2 is captured by a green roof? You basically pick your topic, like retention, and what is stormwater detention? And what's the difference between retention and detention? You can click on the SoundCloud, so you can hear my funny Dutch accent, because sometimes we take these stories and put them in audio, so you can listen to it while you drive or sit in a public transportation. Lots of stormwater. If I have to bet the industry, what is going to break open the industry, it's going to be stormwater. If we create an accepted form of stormwater retention and detention on a green roof, that's what's going to create a lot of green roofs, not just aesthetics and not just lead points. So lots of information on this website, but I am very open to questions, because I talk a lot. So feel free to answer any questions. And if you want to schedule like a one-on-one session for your specific project or your firm, I'd be more than happy to do like a virtual lunch and learn, or hopefully soon do it in person. So if you have any questions, please let me know.
Well, thank you, Dick. That was awesome. And boy, I was very, I learned a lot. I was really impressed with the purple roof concept. And I can really see that being used in a wide variety of applications. But we got roughly 15 minutes. I would love to open this up to others who are attending. We got a good sized group this morning. So if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself, or we're monitoring the chat too, so you can type that in as well.
Yeah, and just so you know, we're doing testing at the University of California Riverside location to use the mineral wool in ground level applications as well, because obviously not just reducing the amount of irrigation on a rooftop is important. There's a heck of a lot more landscape that we can manage, like new parks are being built. Can we find a way to reduce the amount of irrigation for those parks? So we're in year 3 of testing, and we are finding great results in the use of just a mineral wool in landscape applications.
Okay, well, I see. Melissa, you're unmuted. Did you have a question? Maybe not. Anyone have a question? Well, while people are thinking of a question, I do. And one of the challenges we've met in or seen in this area when it comes to green roof stick is a lot of municipalities are afraid of them. And in their municipal code, they have even not allowed green roofs. Is there a workaround that? Is there education? I mean, obviously, we're doing this event. That's part of educating the community. But what's the best way to tackle something like that?
Well, it's usually conversation and showing reference. Like I said in the very beginning, like people were very worried about, like, oh, what if there's a leak in the building? The roofer is going to show up and it's like, A, I didn't cause it, and B, who's going to remove this green roof, and so I can fix my my leak. So it's basically the great unknown. And we've crossed that barrier in the larger cities. And in San Francisco right now, in South San Francisco today, we're installing 20,000 square foot of green roof. The Academy of Sciences has a massive green roof on top of their building. So it's usually what's left are like the smaller communities that are simply or simply old school methods, right? Like, no, we want to get water away from our roof. Or like, oh, I don't want additional weight on my roof. It's references, giving them like a peace of mind, like, hey, this has been done before. You're not the first one. I cannot even count how many green roofs we've done in the past 14 years, but every week we do about 8 or 9 projects. And obviously that's going to spike right before the winter hits, and it's going to slow down during the winter months. But we do an enormous amount of green roofs. So it's likely that there's one in that community or close to it. And I simply have to understand, or we as an industry have to understand why they are reluctant. What is the reason why people are not open to green roof? And I mean, basically you can't win them all. But there's green roofs in so many unexpectedly small cities, even in Oklahoma, in Little Rock, Arkansas. They're everywhere.
So is it possible, or would a company like Semper Green be able to work with the developer, maybe go to the planning commission and present why this should be an allowed exception to maybe their typical standards and specifications?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's what we do, and we come with a lot of experience. So I don't think there's any argument we haven't heard yet. And again, you can't win them all, but like, we're more than happy to talk to developers, architects, landscape architects, building owners to see if we can make it happen. And sometimes you can't. Sometimes they say, well, it's made for like 15 pounds a square foot saturated. Like, well, okay, better spend it on a nice vacation. Don't do a green roof.
Yeah. Anyone else have questions? I want to give you a chance to chime in. I always have tons of questions, but anybody else? Just unmute yourself, or, oh, here we do. We do have a one in the chat. Over time, I would think the fines would make it to the lower layers. How are the lower layers maintained? That's a very good question. In your especially in your honeycomb structure, what kind of maintenance is needed on these?
So maintenance, I found like the maintenance was a bit of a struggle. Maintenance of green roofs was a bit of a struggle in the early years, because you could see very well-renowned like landscaping companies would maintain a green roof, and they're great at watering and they're great at pulling the weeds, but to maintain a nutrient program on these roofs it was sometimes a little bit challenging, because they would for example fertilize in the spring and in the fall like you would do with your ground level landscape. But if you do that on a Monday and there's a massive storm on Tuesday, all your nutrients will simply go down the gutter, down the drain, literally. So that's why we started a maintenance company where we do about 3 million square feet of green roof maintenance per year. And it's not necessarily for brand protection. I mean, obviously we want all green roofs to look good, but it's also to learn. And like, hey, a green roof in Seattle, we found out there's quite a bit of acid rain in Seattle. Who knew? We found that a building in Charlotte, no, where was it? Raleigh, close to Raleigh, the green roof was in perfect shape, and the move-in date was scheduled for September 1st, and late September, the green roof looked very poor. Like, what happens? Like, well, they had a water softener in the water, so they're basically watering the green roof with salty water. So there, I cannot say like, oh, this is how you do green roof maintenance. But if I know that the project is in Seattle, I know like, oh, we look at the nutrients. We always do a soil test where it says like basically a blood test for a green roof. Well, we say before we apply fertilizer, we need to know what this green roof is lacking and what it's good on. And if you do that like once a year, you will maintain a very low-key, easy to execute maintenance program on that green roof.
Okay, good. We have another question. For roofs that require irrigation, is this product compatible with using reclaimed water?
Yeah, a lot of green roofs. No, I shouldn't say a lot. But there's definitely like a decent percentage of green roofs that use irrigation with reclaimed water. And it's totally fine. I mean, we're talking to data centers now as well to see if we can, all that water that goes into the cooling towers and the discharge, to see if that we can find a way to treat that water and to use that to irrigate the green roof that they would do to cool down the building. So it's kind of like a circle where we use the water that they would normally discharge to water the green roof that they would choose to have on the green roof to lower the temperature in the building where all those servers are buzzing all day long. So reclaimed water is completely, in most cases, is fine to use.
Okay, good. I know one of the common misconceptions, or I should just say conceptions about green roofs, is that they're so expensive to install. And I think you've spoken some to that this morning, but to the developer who says, oh, I could never afford that, what would you say to them, Dick?
I would say, how do you manage your stormwater? And if they say a stormwater tank, those aren't free either, right? How much value do you put to the space that stormwater tank takes up in your basement? If I give you 10 parking spots back, how much money would that generate? And then they start thinking, because this is a very, very common question. If there's no ROI to a green roof, it's just added cost, added weight, and added risk, right? That's how the inexperienced developers see a green roof. Like, they're over that hump in New York City because I don't know how many green roofs there are, not enough, but like the comfort level is now there. So that's exactly why we turned a green roof into the purple roof concept, to create that ROI, that they say, well, the city is mandating a green roof, therefore I'm going to look at the cheapest, thinnest green roof to check that box. But if I can manage with that green roof that initially I don't really like, but the city is making me do, if I can manage stormwater and get those parking spaces back, I'm all for it. Make it 2 times, 3 times as large, because if that's the cheapest way. So that's the cost factor. So it's comfort level. Hey, you have an apartment, you're an owner of an apartment building. People look out over an empty, like a bare membrane, or are you going to make that pretty like the one behind me? How much rent can you ask? Because you're now that much more attractive than the apartment complex next to you. Facebook, 10 acres of green roof in California, so that the people can have outside time on the roof of that building. There's no one reason why a person should do a green roof, but on the purpleroof.com website, there's one article dedicated to the myths of the green roof. It's too expensive, they always die, I need to always irrigate them, expensive to install. I think the first few were expensive to install because people took longer. All the components were more expensive. So the more volume we do, it's the same with living walls. The more volume we do, the lower cost per square foot they get. The more experience the local landscapers get, the more competitive they can bid the installation of that green roof. So we've come a long way versus the beginning. Obviously, union labor affects the cost of installation quite a bit. And if you have a 700 square foot in Park City, Utah versus a 50,000 square foot on a one-story building in DC, there's different factors that play into it. But the cost has come down quite a bit. The confidence level, the reference projects, and now with turning a green roof in a stormwater management tool, okay. I think they're almost out of reasons not to do a green roof.
So we have one more question. And while I'm doing that, Dick, I think you had a slide with your contact information. You want to share that just so people can contact you with other questions they might have? And while you put that up, I'll field this other question to you. Actually, we got a couple in. Let me take this one here. Because it's very relevant to what's going on in California and much of the West Coast. Is there any information on green roofs in relation to wildfires? I know CAL FIRE has recommended planting water retaining plants such as succulents around a home to assist in creating a barrier. Was anything known about the potential benefits of green roofs in fire prone areas?
Yeah, and sedums are succulents. Yeah, but they store water in their leaves. That's why they are not as known to catch on fire. I think Richard Branson had a massive fire on his tropical island, and most of the structures burned down, and the one that did not burn down was the one that had a green roof on it. I'm not sure if that was pure coincidence, but yeah, a green roof obviously forms a barrier between the structure, the roofing membrane, and a spark from a forest fire. It's not going to stop the fire, but it just creates an extra barrier for your building not to catch on fire.
All right. Well, thank you, Dick. We're just about out of time. So if you want to contact Dick, you see his information there on the screen. I'm definitely wanting to check out his websites and look into that tool that he was highlighting. So Dick, again, thank you for being a part of Stormwater Awareness Week. And thank you to each person that joined us this morning. So if you're having problems getting into the meetings, contact myself. In fact, Rebecca, would you put in our contact information into the chat? There it is, my email. And send me an email if you're having problems getting into our meetings. We'll give you a code. I think for the most part, other than Bob, but for the most part, I don't think we had too many challenges this morning. So definitely give us back some feedback and we'll help you get into the meetings. Plus, each of these are being recorded. So if you missed part or all of a workshop, you can't attend a workshop, definitely come back in about 24 hours or so and we'll have the recorded version at the very same place you logged in for today's workshop. So other workshops coming up this morning at 10 o'clock is one I'm really been anticipating. We're going to have Amy Cronson, who is the lead person with the State Water Resources Control Board for the industrial and the construction general permit. And we're going to be talking to her about the renewed construction general permit that's just gone through public comment. We're going to ask her what type of comment she's received and where that permit is headed. So I think it'll be very interesting to see what she says. There's lots of other workshops today. Another big one at 2 o'clock is Caltrans is going to be talking to us about doing stormwater Caltrans style. And so that may be a very good workshop that some of you will be interested in. All right, well, thank you for joining today. Thank you, Dick, once again. And we'll see everybody at one of the next workshops.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, John, Rebecca, everybody attending. Pleasure.